Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Then Vladimir Putin ordered new missiles to be developed. Is another nuclear arms race on the horizon? Our John Avalon has the reality check, sir.
That's right, guys. So this weekend, I know this is true for you, John, you were probably obsessing over the Super Bowl. The political pregame conversation was surreal, consumed by blackface and the KKK on the Virginia Governor's Medical School yearbook page. On the Trump watch, we were treated to the White House, officially denying that the president's midwinter orange permatan is the result of anything but, quote, good genes. But amid the big game and the palpable weirdness of our political conversation, you might have missed this. The U.S. announced we're pulling out of a landmark nuclear treaty with Russia. That means the world might be on the brink of a new nuclear arms race. And that should get your attention. The treaty is known as the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF. Signed in 1987, it was designed to be a mid-range class of nuclear weapons. And those missiles, which could destroy cities within 10 minutes of being launched, had been increasingly deployed throughout Europe and the Soviet Union. Now, the INF was a real success, one of Reagan's crowning diplomatic achievements, and it cooled tensions at a critical moment in the Cold War. Nearly 2,700 nuclear missiles were destroyed between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. So why would we ditch it now? Well, the answer is the Russians have not been honoring the treaty. Putin criticized it as early as 2007 and was accused of producing new and intermediate-range missile weapon systems during the Obama years, drawing a stern diplomatic rebuke, but little else. Now, a treaty isn't worth much more when only one side is responsible. The other problem is that the bilateral treaty made sense in a dual superpower world, but much less sense today when it's estimated that 95% of China's 2,000 nuclear missiles fall into this category. Now, unless we all change course within 6 months, the treaty will be officially over and open escalation may accelerate on both sides. And this strikes many folks as unwise. Nuclear arms races are good for arms manufacturers, but generally bad for living things. As Reagan's Secretary of State George Shultz recently said, quote, leaving the INF treaty would be a huge step backwards. We should fix it, not kill it. Gorbachev also weighed in, calling Trump's decision to withdraw from the treaty reckless and not the work of, quote, a great mind. It's believed that 9 nations now have nuclear weapons, and non-proliferation efforts are in danger of being a thing of the past. President Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, saying Iran wasn't honoring it, and believes North Korea is on its way to denuclearization completely. But his own intel chiefs say that's not true. Not only that, Trump has dismissed the U.S.-Russian New START treaty as a bad deal and claimed that the U.S. has, quote, fallen behind on nuclear weapon capacity. Quote, if countries are going to have nukes, he says, we're going to be the ones at the top of the pack. Now, arms control may seem less interesting than Super Bowl parties and associated political scandals, but it is deadly serious stuff. As Mikhail Gorbachev recently said, all agreements aimed at nuclear disarmament and limiting nuclear weapons must be preserved for the sake of preserving life on Earth.
It is Tuesday, the 5th of February of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a very hearty dish on a chilly day as we are having, and it's a chill, a pallor across all the face of the earth because tonight is the State of the Union, in which we will pretty much realize the State of the Union is on quite shaky ground. Indeed. Trump is bringing a kid who had been bullied at his school for having the last name of Trump. Now, of course, this is the guy that called Schumer crying Chuck, because Chuck was tearing up in memory of his family members who had been exterminated in the death camps from Nazi Germany. Okay, he was called crying Chuck for that. What about Pocahontas? Yeah, that's, But Trump's going to bring a kid to the State of the Union because he'd been bullied for having the last name of Trump. Hey, look, I was bullied for a little while. I don't want to brag. I wasn't bullied for long. It's always funny when you stand up to a bully and actually, throw a few fists. Now, this is grade school, mind you. But when you stand up to the bully, after it's over, win or lose, they're your friend. How is that possible? But regardless, I was bullied for a bit in grade school for having the last name of Putnam, and I was called Putt-Butt. In fact, I remember being chased around the schoolyard, things being thrown at me with the chant, "Kill Roy Boy Putt-Butt." Okay, yeah, my first name is Roy, short for Royal. I never let anybody know it was Royal. Jesus, it would have been worse. No wonder I went by RJ until I was playing music. Okay, so kids will bully kids regardless of their last name. Their last name is going to be a target for ridicule and scorn, no matter what it is. But Trump doesn't have the maturity and intellectual capacity of a grade schooler, so I guess he is going to bring this little kid, not so little by the way, to the State of the Union because he had been bullied. And I'm thinking, man, you guys ripped like thousands and thousands and thousands of kids from their parents with no intention of giving them back. And what did you call them? Disease-ridden terrorists, I believe. Refugees. So I don't know. Okay, kid, I'm sorry you're bullied. Yeah, you shouldn't be bullied. Everybody gets bullied because of their last name. If your last name was Miller, some kid would find a way to bully you about your last name being Miller. What's on the rest of the menu here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, there is so much more news out there. I mean, we could go on. I had to curate a show. I had to just shut it off. And I actually thought maybe I'd swap some stories out and bring some others in, but I had to call it quits. Okay? Now, at the top, that, of course, was a breakdown on the real world consequences of Trump withdrawing from the INF treaty. Putin. Now, of course, yes, he was violating the treaty. So why would we stop it so that he can just do it more? I mean, it doesn't make any sense unless you made the decision to pull out of the INF treaty because it benefited Putin. Because he's developing all sorts of weapons and he's moving his navy around right now. Oh, my God. And what about the North Koreans? Seems like everybody that was like pretty much tamped down on having nukes, or at least, displaying them. All of them have nukes now. Every single one. Lots more than when Trump started. And they have love letters between each other, too. Makes you wonder. Just makes you wonder. Well, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe, GOP Congressman Lee Zeldin randomly lashed out at Nancy Pelosi after a Jewish website accused him of supporting Nazis. Well, sure. Lash out at Nancy. And he'd already been in a beef with a couple of new freshmen. Should I say women freshmen Democrats of color? Lee, what's up with you? Oh, and did you see David Duke has come out and endorsed Tulsi Gabbard because she'll put America first instead of Israel first. That sounds pretty anti-Semitic if you ask me. David Duke endorsing Tulsi Gabbard, and she hasn't said, hey, I don't accept that endorsement. She hasn't come out and said that, which is basically all you need to know. Trump's plan to keep U.S. troops in Iraq was news to the Iraqis. Yeah, he just said stuff off the cuff, and then everybody has to scramble to make it true. And in a final act, as he heads out the door, Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker is working hard to block child sex abuse victims from seeking asylum. If you thought Jeff Sessions was bad, look what his chief of staff is doing. Jesus Christ. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Trump's nominee to lead the Interior Department is under fire for his illegal actions as acting Interior Secretary during the shutdown. You thought Zinke was bad. It is odd. Or maybe it's their plan. The number 2 guy, and it's always a guy. Well, not always, but tends to be. The number 2 person seems to be even worse than the first person. Certainly there at Interior. And the GOP is implementing a vile plot to sabotage low-income health care even after voters approved it. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page, you will notice the chat room link. Now, many of you have heard this before, but I feel compelled to remind folks and let people who are just happening upon West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy where that chat room link might be. So that is on the rightish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Kelly Lincoln takes care of that. And thank you so much, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage that just happens to be at netrootsradio.com is the contribute button. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you are an integral part of Resistance Radio, resisting as the founders originally intended. And thank you for your generosity. All kidding aside, we are actually in need of funds, and your help is needed. So thank you for those that have, and those that have given me snail mail contact info. I will get your bumper stickers out to you right away. All right. I know I've said that before, but I've been a little preoccupied, and I apologize for that. Okay. Do follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and boy, am I glad he is. And he does it really well. He's got some pithy stuff that goes out there. So check that out. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I get it out on social media. You know, Brad Friedman of the Brad blog, and he and Desi do the Green News Report. He has a little app that he's able to program on his phone, and I wish I could figure out a way to do this on my laptop, but I'll figure it out. But just give auto alerts when the show starts. I should do that. Okay, you can follow Netroots. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out a raw story by Tana Ganeva. I tried to go to Alternate, but I didn't find this one on Alternate, only because to keep Raw Story open, I have to turn off my ad block. But then when you turn off your ad block, geez, then you got all these like banner ads gumming everything up, and the page doesn't move as quickly. Or sometimes you just have to get out of there. All right. But as it is, we're in Raw Story, and if you go there, well, you know what it's like. New York Congressman Lee Zeldin, Repug of New York, exploded on Twitter yesterday at Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, who happens to be a Democrat of California, and Ilhan Omar, the Democrat from Minnesota, who's a freshman. His outburst took place after a writer in The Forward, a Jewish magazine, wrote a piece criticizing him after he claimed Friday to be the target of an anti-Semitic voicemail. Omar and Zeldin had clashed on the social media site earlier in the week. In an op-ed titled "The Hypocrisy of Lee Zeldin's Attack Against Ilhan Omar," Nyla Burton acknowledged that Zeldin had every right to publicize his traumatizing experience. There is no question that as a victim of threats and bigotry, Zeldin has a right to expose this violation. But what he did next violated the laws of common decency, she wrote, as well as betraying something deeply sinister. Rather than using the ugly voicemail as an opportunity to create solidarity, Zeldin used it as a cudgel with which to beat freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who just happens to be Muslim. In the same tweet, Zeldin demanded that Omar publicly state that she disagreed with every part of the voicemail, which she promptly did, Burton continued. She laid out the hypocrisy of Zeldin's position. For starters, why would Omar be responsible for a random anti-Semitic voicemail on his phone, she wrote. The idea that this should be laid down on her doorstep is both racist and Islamophobic. Omar is black and a Muslim, two groups of people who are routinely approached with the unreasonable demand that they denounce this or that person or be smeared as an anti-Semite. Omar, whose name was not mentioned once in the voicemail, is not responsible for the actions of the caller, Nyla Burton wrote. Omar does not have a relationship with this person. Omar is not inviting this person to events or promoting this person's statements. And Omar has never once advocated for the oppression, systemic or otherwise, of Jews in America or in Israel. The worst that can be said about her is that she supports BDS, the boycott of Israel, and that she once wrote a poorly worded tweet about Israel, which she has since apologized for, Burton concluded in response. Zeldin doubled down, slamming both Omar and House Speaker Pelosi, because that's what the New World Trumpsters do. And Zeldin wrote in his tweet, this person calls me Nazi-supporting, and you're going to play along promoting this person's eager attack on a Jewish member of Congress? You call yourself a Jewish newspaper? And all good for you, too? And then he tagged Ilhan Omar. And then he tags Nancy Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi, want to speak? Stop empowering this. Meaning a Jewish newspaper calling Zeldin out for, basically supporting the Nazis. Vaz of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Donald Trump's interviews seldom fail to deliver moments that have newsroom fact-checkers busy, sometimes scratching their heads, other times updating their Pinocchio spreadsheets of presidential lies and misrepresentations. For Iraq watchers, though, Trump's interview with CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday was a bonanza of exclamation marks. Here's the upshot. Trump said he would keep American troops in Iraq because he wants to keep an eye on Iran. I want to be looking a little bit at Iran because Iran is a real problem, he said on Sunday, clarifying that he's not planning on attacking Iran. All I want to do is be able to watch. I like to watch. All I like to do is watch. Yeah. Almost like being there, except a lot nastier and violent. There's just one problem. Trump failed to run this strange surveillance plan by his Iraqi counterpart. Iraqi President Barham Salih told reporters in Baghdad yesterday that U.S. troops are in Iraq to help local forces fight terrorism, not spy on Iran. Don't overburden Iraq with your own issues, said Salih. The U.S. is a major power. Do not pursue your own policy priorities. We live here, he added, flat out rejecting the notion. The Trump administration has been all but literally gunning for Iran. Last year, Trump withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal and reimposed brutal sanctions on the country. In addition to taking issue with Iran's ballistic missile program, the Trump administration has demanded that Iran essentially change its entire foreign policy in order to once again get sanctions relief. His administration continues to maintain that all options, including a military one, are on the table. I don't think that it was a fully considered statement, said former Ambassador Barbara Bodine, who served in Iraq, among other countries, during her diplomatic career. I don't think he understands how we watch a country. She also pointed out that U.S. government facilities in Arab countries in the Persian Gulf serve to monitor Iranian activity, and that's on top of the, actual spying. We've got satellites and spies and spooks and allies and all sorts of things and people who watch Iran, said Bodine, listing just some of the ways U.S. intelligence operates inside Iraq. But that's not what Trump was told by Vlad. I mean, we have to make this clear. Do you really think this executive time is spent just watching Fox? Please. Unilaterally stating how U.S. troops should remain on an Iraqi base is not considered appropriate diplomatic behavior, particularly if it would complicate a, let's call it, workable relationship out of necessity. Small point, sir. Iraq isn't a sovereign state, Bodine said, referring to Trump's plan. Another important point is that Iran is actually an Iraqi ally in the war against extremist groups such as ISIS. While the political relationship between the neighbors can be tense, there is little doubt that without Iran's support of the Shia militia in Iraq, ISIS would be on far stronger footing in the country rather than in territorial retreat. Well, maybe that's the plan, isn't it? Who benefits by this? Certainly not America. But Russia does. Coincidentally? I wonder. Or is it convenient? I think the greatest risk we run, Bodine continued, is that we become irrelevant background noise to the countries in the region. Then she added that increasingly U.S. partners in the region might talk to Turkey, or perhaps Russia, rather than the U.S. They don't know what we're going to do. We're not predictable. We're not reliable. We, she said, are not dependable. Needham of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Trump administration has long been dead set on harming immigrants and asylum seekers, and now Matthew Whitaker, Trump's acting attorney general, may be preparing to bar domestic violence victims, including children who are victims of sexual abuse, from seeking asylum in the United States. If Whitaker does this, he will be extending and increasing the cruelty of his predecessor, Jeff Sessions. Last June, Sessions issued a rule saying that generally claims by people suffering from domestic violence or gang violence would not be eligible for asylum. Has anyone asked him when was the last time they beat their wives and kids? Maybe they oughta. A federal court slapped down that ruling in late December, permanently enjoining the government from enforcing it. But now, immigration and domestic violence advocates are raising alarms that Whitaker appears poised to try a different approach to accomplish the same objective. The Daily Beast reports that Whitaker is taking the unusual step of directing the Board of Immigration Appeals to let him decide a particular case on asylum claims, which attorney generals typically do in order to set a legal precedent. One way immigrants can claim asylum is by showing they are a member of a particular social group that faces persecution in their home country. A family can count as being part of that group, and victims of domestic violence, particularly victims of child sexual abuse, often make the permanent social group claims because their attacker is a member of their family. Especially when it comes to child abuse cases, this is the best mechanism for arguing those cases, immigration attorney Eileen Sturlock told the Daily Beast. Also, in incest cases where a father rapes a daughter, those are really egregious cases, and losing that ability to argue a family-based PSG claim is going to make those cases even more difficult. Now, you have to understand, particularly in Sessions' case, and I think maybe by extension Whitaker, is that if you make a precedent that incestual sexual abuse can offer you asylum, what does it mean about the kids in their own families? Will they be able to ask for asylum one day? Yeah, you make the connection. Why are they so intent on this? Are they looking in terms of self-interest? Makes you wonder, especially with Sessions and I don't know, am I making a sweeping generalization? Well, of course I am. Well, it looks like this is exactly what Whitaker is preparing to do. Whitaker has asked the parties in a case, matter of LEA, to brief him on whether and under what circumstances someone can establish persecution on account of their members or of their membership in a PSG. With his order last year, Sessions tried to say women who fear domestic violence from a family member was not a member of a PSG. Whitaker is taking a different tack, but is similarly designed to narrow who qualifies. The matter of LEA, that case involves an asylum seeker. LEA said he was targeted by a drug cartel because of his family relationship. His father owned a store in Mexico City. A drug cartel approached his father and demanded to sell drugs in the store. The father refused, and then the cartel approached LEA and asked him to sell the drugs in his father's store. When he refused, the cartel tried to kidnap him. He got away, fled to the U.S. to seek asylum, saying that his particular social group was his family. An immigration judge denied his claim, saying he wasn't only threatened because of his family, he was threatened because he was interfering with the drug trade. Well, the government found that the PSG claims, where the membership was based on a familial relationship, were a permissible way to seek asylum and sent the case back down to an immigration judge. And that's when Whitaker stepped in. And taking the case away from the BIA and asking the parties to brief him on the issue, Whitaker is likely interested in undercutting the use of familial relationships as membership in a PSG. This has severe consequences for victims of domestic violence. Those claims are based on being able to say it is because of their member in their family unit that they are being harmed. If that avenue is taken away, many people fleeing brutal familial violence will have no grounds for asylum, which is exactly what the Trump administration wants. And victims of violence have to hope that once again, a court will intervene to protect them. Well, let's hope it's not a Federalist Society, Judge. Let's hope. All right, let's get on to our break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to go through weather from around the world. And boy, we have a little bit of snow around here. So then we're going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Last Laugh. Stan and Ollie is less of a buddy movie than a tender-hearted romance of two friends near the end of their lives and once glorious careers. Based on the real-life comedy power duo Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, Stan and Ollie is a portrait of the two performers well after their reign as kings of the box office. Set in the 1950s, Stan and Ollie have reluctantly agreed to tour the UK and Ireland in order to fund a comeback movie, namely a version of Robin Hood written by the former. However, nothing is certain, and as the tour begins, the movie hasn't been greenlighted for production. In addition to funding issues, Ollie, played by a brilliant John C. Reilly, is having health problems and wonders if he's physically up for the role. Stan, played by Steve Coogan, in what should have been a nominated performance, is still optimistic that the film will proceed and believes that the duo still has at least one hurrah to come. While there are some laughs here, Stan and Ollie makes no bones that it is, at its heart, a drama. It is also a portrait of a marriage, specifically the professional showbiz partnership of Laurel and Hardy, and all the tension and frustration that develop over the decades, as well as the very real marriages of the two entertainers to two strong, albeit very different women. In particular, Shirley Henderson shines as Ollie's wife Lucille, whose love and tender devotion to him provides some of the film's gentler moments. Likewise, Nina Arianda is hilarious as Ollie's outspoken Russian-born wife, Ida. Watching her and Henderson play off each other is truly a delight. All in all, Stan and Ollie is a wonderful, understated gem of a movie, even if your parents weren't born when the pair embarked on their final tour. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Pain. It's unpleasant. But what if pain could be rendered less painful, emotionally speaking? Such uncoupling might not be entirely far-fetched, because researchers have located a set of neurons that seem to encode the feelings of hurt that accompany pain.
Pain is both a sensory and emotional experience.
Gregory Scherer, a pain expert at Stanford University.
Much of the research so far in the pain field has focused on the sensory aspect of pain perception, and in particular how cells in our nerves are able to detect stimuli that we perceive as painful.
But less is known about why most of us find pain so distressing. So Scherer and his colleagues set out to first identify those brain cells that are active when an animal experiences pain. The researchers used a miniature microscope to look at the brains of living mice. That technology was developed by Mark Schnitzer, who does neuroscience and applied physics at Stanford.
This microscope is small and light enough that it can be borne on the head of an adult mouse as the animal behaves in a natural manner.
When these microscope-wearing mice were poked with a pin or exposed to mild heat or cold, cells in a subregion of their amygdalas lit up.
So this indicated that there's a particular type of cell in a given region of the brain that seemed to specifically encode the percept of pain.
But are these cells responsible for sensing pain or interpreting that sensation? To find out, the researchers shut the cells down, and they poked the animals again.
And so when we did that, what we observed is that while animals were still withdrawing from the stimulus, indicating that they could detect it, so the sensation aspect of pain was intact, they didn't seem to care about the stimulus.
That is, they didn't make any effort to avoid the place where they experienced the discomfort, which is how mice usually react to pain. The findings are in the journal Science. A future part of treating pain could therefore involve targeting these particular neurons. You'd still have the physical part of the pain, but the negative perception of the pain could be diminished, which means still pain, but also gain. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Hanging in Adolf Hitler's office in 1931 was a large portrait of Henry Ford, because when it came to anti-Semitism, Hitler said, quote, "I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration." I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Facts regarding Ford's anti-Semitism are well-known, undisputed, and indeed self-authenticated. Some were included in a biographical sketch of him in a recent edition of the magazine of the Historical Society of Dearborn, Michigan, the birthplace of Ford's eponymous car company. In response to that article, the mayor of Dearborn, John O'Reilly, banned the distribution of the journal because the story interfered, he said, with his message and policies of inclusion. And O'Reilly, it seems, may well have full authority to censor the magazine because it's published by the city's historical commission, which is part and parcel and paid for by the city. Fortunately, censorship in America often backfires, and it did here. The mayor's attempted censorship has caused the article and the journal to be distributed far wider than it ever has been in the past. So now many, many more people, including many in Dearborn, know about Henry Ford's virulent and dangerous anti-Semitism, which is all to the good, because, as the philosopher and writer George Santayana said, quote, "Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Federal prosecutors from the Southern District of New York Monday evening served a wide-ranging subpoena on Donald Trump's inaugural committee, seeking an array of documents, including all information related to inaugural donors, vendors, contractors, bank accounts of the inaugural committee, and any information related to foreign contributors to the committee. MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell has more.
One of the most mysterious mountains of money that Donald Trump has raised and controlled is the record $107 million raised by President Trump's inaugural committee, the most any inaugural committee had ever raised. Federal prosecutors in New York City are now trying to trace every penny of that money. The document indicates that prosecutors are investigating crimes related to conspiracy to defraud the United States, mail fraud, false statements, wire fraud, and money laundering.
Delayed for a week due to Trump's government shutdown, the president on Tuesday night delivers his second State of the Union address. This, as a new poll, shows that a majority of voters say they oppose a second term for Trump, disapprove of his 35-day government shutdown over a wall, and worry that the country is on the wrong track. After 2 years in office in which he habitually derided the Democrats as the opposition, his political enemies, and worse, Trump's aides say that the speech will call for bipartisanship and working across the aisle. Perhaps watching the speech with a laugh track would make the thing more bearable. The Democrats' official response will be delivered by Stacey Abrams, the first black woman major party gubernatorial nominee in U.S. history. Her remarks will be carried live by all the same TV outlets who air the State of the Union address. Senator Bernie Sanders tweeted, quote, "Stacey Abrams is a great choice to deliver the Democratic response. I'm very much looking forward to her speech. For the third year in a row, following the Democratic rebuttal, I'll be on Facebook Live, Twitter, and YouTube to respond to Trump." While the Bernie haters on social media came out swinging, claiming he was trying to steal the spotlight of an African-American woman. Give me a break. It's behavior like this that'll guarantee a second Trump term. Remember the Trump administration's policy of separating children from their parents when they arrive at our borders seeking asylum? It was announced Monday that committees in both the House and Senate will hold hearings on the policy. MSNBC's Ali Velshi explained.
The administration does not dispute an Inspector General report which says that thousands more migrant children may have been separated beyond the 2,700 children who were removed under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy in 2018. In the court documents, a top official with Health and Human Services says that even if tracking down the separated children were, quote, within the realm of the possible, her office does not have the resources to do it. Legal Alert, the ACLU's lead attorney in the suit, said in a statement, quote, "The Trump administration's response is a shocking concession that it can't easily find thousands of children it ripped from parents and doesn't even think it's worth the time to locate each of them."
Now on to Virginia, where embattled Governor Ralph Northam is still refusing to step down, insisting that he doesn't want to be known as a, quote, racist for life. He might want to go back and listen to his story of wearing blackface to compete in a Michael Jackson dance contest and realize that
I had the shoes, I had a glove, and I used just a little bit of shoe polish to put under on my cheeks. And the reason I used a very little bit is because I don't know if anybody's ever tried that, but you cannot get shoe polish off. But it was a dance contest. I had always liked Michael Jackson. I actually won the contest because I had learned how to do the moonwalk. But then let me tell you what happened. I have a very close friend who was my assistant during the campaign. I don't think he would mind me telling you his name. His name is Seth Opoku-Yeboah. And during some of our long rides around the Commonwealth, the very issue of blackfacing came up. And he really did a good job communicating to me why that's so offensive. And it was actually during that conversation, I said, you know, Seth, I put some polish on my face. I competed in a dance contest dressed up as Michael Jackson. And I said, I assume you probably would think that's offensive. He said, I would. And I said, you know what, Seth? I appreciate you being open with me. I apologize for what I've done in the past, and I can promise you I'll never do that again in the future.
Meanwhile, the right-wing website that first published the racist photo from Northam's medical school yearbook is now targeting Virginia's Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, reporting an accusation of sexual assault in 2004. Fairfax and his office vehemently deny the accusations. And finally, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has shut up the QAnon conspiracy theorist who spread rumors that she was dead by making her first public appearance since undergoing cancer surgery in December. The 85-year-old attended an event called Notorious RBG in Song at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. on Monday night, a musical celebration of her achievements. She underwent a pulmonary lobectomy just a few days before Christmas after doctors discovered cancerous nodules in her left lung. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. 16 European nations formally recognized opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido as Venezuela's legitimate leader on Monday, lending Guaido another diplomatic boost as he attempts to force President Nicolas Maduro out of office and pave the way for new elections. France, Germany, Spain, and the UK joined a dozen other EU powers in backing Guaido, who already enjoys the recognition of the US and Canada and 14 other countries across Latin America and the Caribbean. EU leaders had originally hoped to release a joint statement recognizing Guaido on behalf of all 28 EU member states, but that move was vetoed by Italy, leaving countries to make decisions on their own. As those recognitions trickled in on Monday, several countries cited Maduro's failure to call for new presidential elections as the reason for their decision. Late last month, several of Europe's top diplomatic powers gave Maduro until Sunday to present a timeline to prepare fair and inclusive elections. In a weekend interview with Spanish news program La Sexta, Maduro chafed at the notion of adhering to outside demands. We don't accept ultimatums from anyone, he says. It's like if I told the European Union, I give you 7 days to recognize the Republic of Catalonia, and if you don't, we're going to take measures. International politics can't be based on ultimatums. Back in the U.S., as President Trump prepares a State of the Union address likely to make reference to his administration's pressure campaign on Venezuela, that strategy attracted one high-profile Democratic detractor, presidential candidate and Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard.
I wholeheartedly support the Venezuelan people as they fight for a free and fair democracy. But the United States should not be in the business of intervening, of picking who should lead their country.
Gabbard went on to warn U.S. threats of regime change in Venezuela could derail delicate upcoming nuclear talks with North Korea. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. I am fighting a little bit of a stuffy nose, so I apologize. I'll try not to sniffle or any of that sort of thing, because it is, well, icky. All right. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees. And it's crusty out there. We're expecting some snow. We were expecting, actually, snow much earlier in the morning. And we should be getting quite a bit of rain later on today because we're going to go up to the low 40s, upper 30s, low 40s. And then tonight, we're supposed to have a mix of rain and snow early. And I should say that it was quite chilly yesterday, and it may be a mix of rain and snow considerably before the evening hours. Tomorrow, we are expecting not so much in the way of rain or snow, and the temps should be in the mid-40s, which could be nice. We'll see about that. Winds are light and variable out of the southeast and will remain so. Overnight lows in the upper 20s, low 30s. And I will be traveling Thursday night, Friday morning, so I'm hoping there's supposed to be another storm coming through, and that may be the deciding factor if I leave more like Thursday rather than Friday. But you will still hear Kangaroo in the morning, and we'll have something in this hour at least. And then as a reminder also, I'll be returning Monday night, Tuesday morning. Not sure if I'm going to have a show for Tuesday morning, but there will be something here, and we'll be back on a regular schedule at least for the rest of the radio station. All right, let's see. A wintry mix will continue. Pollen is rated as none. Air quality index is actually, it's in the good, but it's edged up considerably to 47 parts per million from yesterday's 8 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.6 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles and relative humidity is 86%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 44 and cloudy. Oh, Paris is 46 and partly cloudy. Rome is 58 degrees and sunny. Kiev is 33 with a light drizzle. Kabul is 25 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong, 66 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 44 and mostly cloudy, and they've taken down their dry air advisory, so that's good to hear. Sydney, Australia is inching ever closer to their summer, and it is 75 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco is 39 and partly cloudy. And New York is a balmy 55 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. E.A. Crunden of Think Progress brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. It's comfort food, truly, folks, with a bit of protein, just so you know. Well, it looks like David Bernhardt will have to answer to Democrats over bringing back employees for offshore drilling and leaving national parks open during the shutdown. What was he thinking? Look at what happened to Joshua Tree. Left it open for a bunch of Trump bro off-roaders, and they destroyed so much of that park. Oh, the bulldozers are about ready to take down the butterfly refuge down there along the border because leave no stone unturned. Trump announced yesterday he will nominate Acting Interior Secretary David Bernhardt to lead the Interior Department permanently, a move that comes just as House Democrats are ramping up their efforts to investigate the department's actions during the partial government shutdown. They always double down. The nomination is unlikely to be a smooth process, with House Democrats preparing to interrogate Bernhardt over the Department of Interior's movements last month during the shutdown. In addition to leaving national parks open using funding meant for other purposes, Interior also brought back employees to work on controversial projects relating to offshore drilling. Bernhardt has led the agency in an acting capacity for over a month after former Secretary Ryan Zinke announced his resignation at the end of 2018 amid mounting ethics and spending scandals. Well, that's the least of it. But since he came to Interior as Assistant Secretary, Bernhardt has been seen as instrumental to many policy rollbacks. Some of the most controversial actions of the Trump administration, including altering the Endangered Species Act, scaling back national monuments, are widely seen as being Bernhardt's work, because he's really on an audition for the lead. Everybody knows that. He'd previously worked as an oil and gas lobbyist, as well as for agribusinesses fighting environmental safeguards. Because saving lives is not profitable, don't you know? Environmental groups slammed Bernhardt's nomination. The Natural Resources Defense Council, the Wilderness Society, and the Center for Western Priorities were among the organizations panning Trump's choice as a dangerous move for environmental advocates.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière.
la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Matthew Chapman of Alternate brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. One of the major policy accomplishments of the 2018 midterm elections was to be the further expansion of Medicaid into Red America. After resounding ballot referendum victories in Utah, voters approved Medicaid expansion by 54%, while in Idaho, voters approved it by 60%. If fully implemented, it would grant health care to tens of thousands of low-income Americans. Oh, no, not that. So naturally, Republicans in both states are trying to kill it in the cradle, because that's where they want it. In Utah, the state Senate just passed a bill that would cut back eligibility for expansion for people making 138% of the poverty line, or $16,750 per year for an individual, to 100% of the poverty line, or just $12,140 per year. The bill would also automatically freeze enrollment if costs exceed the funding appropriated by the legislature, which is ironic, given the GOP's proposal would cost 7 times more than the original ballot proposition over the next 4 years, even while covering fewer people, because the bill that they're trying to get rid of helps people, and the one that they want helps the insurers and the middlemen. Doesn't help the doctors. Let's be clear. GOP lawmakers in Idaho are debating a number of changes to the voter-passed initiative, including co-pays, lifetime coverage limits, and work requirements. Any of these would be a disaster for low-income people who need care, since Arkansas adopted its work requirement policy for Medicaid. 17,000 people have been thrown off the program, many of whom actually have been working, but live in rural areas without internet coverage, where reporting their work to the state is almost impossible. In addition to violating the spirit of the voters' decision, Republicans in both states will need a waiver from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to enact these changes, which violate the federal guidelines of the Medicaid program. However, Trump's CMS administrator, Seema Verma, is an anti-government fanatic who has been enthusiastically exempting states from any Medicaid rules that prevent them from disenrolling the poor. This is not the first time Republicans have flouted the voters' decision to expand Medicaid. Then Governor Paul LePage in 2017 flatly refused to implement it. You could tell the Maine people I would go to jail before I put the state in red ink, and instead he went to Florida. On other occasions, Republicans have resorted to blatant trickery to undermine the popular vote in Michigan, when voters gathered the signatures for ballot measures on paid sick leave and a minimum wage increase. The GOP-controlled legislature got around it by passing these measures as regular bills, then severely cutting them back after the election. Process. They know process. And we know that it's the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we're going to be back tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And you know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7 for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up with you here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.